All right, good evening and welcome to the East Bay Community Energy Board of Directors meeting for September 20th. I would ask that we do the roll call.
Albany.
Here.
Berkeley.
Here.
Dublin.
Here.
Emeryville. Here.
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 Livermore.
Here.
Oakland.
Here.
Piedmont.
Present.
San Leandro.
Present.
Union City. Alameda County.
Here.
Thank you.
We have one more.
Community Advisory Committee. Here.
I got your back, Ann Olivia. All right. With that, it's not on the agenda, but please join Biddle in the pledge.
Where's the flag? Join.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public comment time. Oh, just a little FYI before we get too far along. Item 5 is being continued, and it is being continued for 2 weeks. So set your calendars for October 4th. We will be having a meeting. Okay? Everybody okay?
Yes,
Point
of order. How did at our last meeting, we agreed to adjourn to go back to the second Wednesday. How do these decisions get made to schedule the special meetings?
How what?
How do the decisions get made to schedule special meetings absent a quorum of the board?
Well, the point of order on that is we're supposed to be meeting every 2 weeks. If you'll remember, we discussed that at the board meeting also, that we wanted to go back to an every 2 week schedule. And quite frankly, the issue that will be before us in 2 weeks is of importance, and it's being continued tonight. So as the chairman, I made that choice.
I see. I was referring to the minutes of our last meeting in which it says we adjourned to September 20th, and there was also a reference to...
Okay, so you're on the minutes? Schedule. You're on the minutes? Because I haven't gotten there yet. Can you wait? Okay, thanks. All right, so everybody's okay with... I just want to be clear. This is not a dictatorship, although somebody thinks maybe. Is the 4th an okay date for everybody to meet? You want to call your wife? Call mine. She'll say, fine, he can be out of the house. I just want to make sure we have a quorum. Is people feeling like that will be a good date? I'm seeing a lot of nods. One call wife and one will send an email. She said yes. Very good. And Al, are you still conferring? Al will be here. So we will have a special meeting on the 4th. The item of the business before us will be item 5, which is the update on the billing data management call center selection authorization for the CEO to execute the contract. So that will be before us. It is not before us tonight. All right, with that, public
I'm not
comment?
available on October 4th due to interviews for a council vacancy. Sorry. I'll not be available on October 4th due to interviews for a vacancy on my council.
You know what? I had this problem one night when I couldn't hear for some reason. The acoustics down there from you coming this way is hard for me to hear.
I'm not available on October 4th due to a special council meeting.
And I'm assuming your alternate won't be available either?
She's also a council member, so no, she will not be available.
And if we held it, what time is your council meeting?
It's a special meeting, so it might be 5:30 or 6.
All right, well, unfortunately, I think I have the majority of everybody else saying they can do it. If you were going to meet at 7 and there was a possibility that I could meet a little earlier or have everybody agree to meet a little earlier, we might try that, but not knowing the time right now, I would just say we're going to schedule the meeting for the 4th and hope that you can make it. And if you can find out when that council meeting is, and if meeting maybe an hour earlier at 5, would that be a problem for anybody here? No. It will be for Dan, I think, but usually making it earlier is harder for him. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is we can be flexible. If you can find out the time of that council meeting, we can revisit that before the end of the meeting. Maybe if we meet at 5, that might be able to get you to get your council meeting.
I doubt I'll be able to get an answer on that from staff at this hour, but I'll certainly try.
Okay. All right. So as of right now, October 4th, 6 o'clock. Thank you. Public comment, a time in which you can speak to anything that is not on today's agenda. Jennifer West, Barbara Stebbins. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to introduce myself. I am a new member of the staff at Stop Waste, and I'm working on energy efficiency related projects there. Some of you know me because I served on the Emeryville City Council for 5 years, and I served on the Stop Waste Board when the Energy Council was formed. So I'm thrilled to be in this position tonight to say hello to you, to pass my card over to the clerk so that if you're interested in being in touch with me, I'd be happy to set up a time to speak with any of you about the work that I'm doing and how we can support. I want to congratulate all of you on how far you've come in the last few years, and also just express my excitement for where things are headed. So thank you so much, and it's nice to see you tonight.
Thank you for coming down. Appreciate it. Barbara.
You all know me, Barbara Stebbins, here with Local Clean Energy Alliance tonight. I'm here to invite you to an exciting program Monday, the 25th in Oakland City Hall. We have a visitor from Berlin, Wolfram Morales, who is the chief economist for Sparkasse, which is the local public banks in Germany. That's the Association of Local Public Banks. He's here to talk about how Germany developed local renewable resources. Over 50% of their renewable energy is locally owned and situated. So we're really excited to have him. Nick Chassett will be on the panel along with Jessica Tovar and Greg Rosen, who's a financial whiz. So and it's hosted by Dan Kaplan and Rebecca Kaplan and Dan Kalb. And I just want to also point out that Oakland took the historic step of voting to do a feasibility study on a public bank of Oakland, and Berkeley stepped up to put in some help financially to get that to happen.
We're currently taking donations also for any of the cities who want to pitch in.
They're running up quite a debt here right now. So, okay, so with that, thank you. That's the end of public comment. Before I move on, I'll wait for staff announcements and board member comments, because we do need to talk about some of these CCA bills that hit us in the legislature towards the end of the session. They would have been of huge detriment to us since we hadn't gotten started. And while I'm talking about it, I do want to thank all the public advocates who were out there beating the bushes and working with legislators to make sure that didn't happen. And I see Barbara shaking her head. She was out there, and I know Al Weinrab was out there, and others. And I want to thank them, because those bills would have they would have destroyed us, and quite frankly left Alameda County hanging with a big old bill. So, and then my colleagues would have gotten pretty mad at me. So having said that, I think, Nick, at some point we do need to talk about legislative actions and how we're going to deal with that moving forward. We can do that when we get to item 9.
Okay.
Item 10, I'm sorry.
Great.
All right. Approval of minutes, August 2nd. On the minutes, there was a problem.
Chair Haggerty, I just would like to make a correction that I was not at the meeting. My alternate was, so if the clerk could please make that correction.
Fine. Can you give your stipend back, please? Go ahead.
In item 7 of the minutes, board member and staff announcements, it reads, staff announced meeting schedule will return to third Wednesday of the month, which doesn't appear to be correct.
Well, that was the decision. Pardon me, Chair. The meetings are set for the first and third Wednesday of each month. We had agreed that we would hold the first one only if necessary, and the third would be the standing meeting.
I'm still trying to figure out where he was on there. What item was it?
Item 7.
Okay, so right now, sorry, I'm moving slow today. I don't even know what the date is. Thanks, Al. I got that part. I did say I didn't know what the date was, didn't I? So right now we are on the third Wednesday, and
The August 2nd meeting was on the first Wednesday of the month. So that's why the staff announced that it would be returning to the 3rd.
well, I think what we had talked about was we wanted to get back to a 2-week schedule if necessary.
Chair Haggerty, what the clerk has stated is my recollection is that our standing meeting was the 3rd Wednesday, and that if we needed to meet on a more frequent basis, we would do the first Wednesday as well.
Okay, I think, is that fine with the executive director?
Yeah, I think that, this instance, we need it, and maybe what we should do, Stephanie, is at the 3rd Wednesday sort of meeting, we'll have a discussion and make a determination as to whether we want to have that intermediate meeting or not, and in some cases we may very well want to do it, and in some cases we may say it's not necessary.
So maybe, does this help if we add the fact that that the first Wednesday of each month will be considered at the 3rd meeting or something like that?
Yeah.
Is that correct, the minutes?
Well, perhaps from a scheduling standpoint, just because I know everybody's schedules are busy, that we schedule it, and then there will be a discussion at that 3rd meeting to determine whether or not we're going to actually indeed have the meeting or not. And it may be that we decide no need, we'll proceed to the meeting 4 weeks from there. Or in some instances we may say yes, let's indeed hold it, but it'll be on everyone's calendar. So does that make sense, Stephanie? Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I do know at the Air District, they actually schedule them and then council them. But if you want to say that at the 3rd Wednesday, we'll make a determination if the first Wednesday of the month is needed, then we can do that too.
Okay.
So if the minutes will reflect that, then can I get a motion? So moved. Al? Thank you.
A second.
I need a second. Biddle? Okay, go ahead, Anna Olivia.
The minutes do not reflect that I was also in attendance at the meeting. So
The
just
minutes
correct
what?
that. Do not reflect that I was also in attendance.
You were.
I was here.
I think you flew in specially for us, if I remember right. So if we could please add Anna Olivia, please. Okay, so with the addition of the 2 members, one was here, one was not here, and the change in the minutes on item 7 as amended, I'm assuming that's your motion now?
Yes.
And that was your second, Biddle?
Yep.
Is there any objection to the motion?
Nope.
Motion passed without objection. Getting through some pretty thorny issues here. Okay. All right, move to item 4.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Tonight I will be asking the board to appoint members to an executive committee. The Joint Powers Agreement provides that the board may create an executive committee that should be less than a quorum. We thought that 5 was a good number since it's nice to have an odd number in these types of groups. The Joint Powers Agreement also provides that the members of the executive committee must be directors of the board. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Comments? No comments on this? The only thing that I wanted to say is, if we are, I think the 1-year term seems a little, seems like it should be 2 years, but if nobody else cares, I'm fine with the way it's written. It's up to you guys. And there's no thoughts, I'll entertain a motion.
The term is completely within the discretion of the board. The term is within the discretion of the board, so it could be longer.
I understand that, but I probably wouldn't have written it that way myself. But Anna Olivia?
The Community Advisory Committee discussed this last evening and have come to this board with a recommendation that there be a non-voting member of the Community Advisory Committee represented on the Exec Council. Even though these are open meetings, it is a very different commitment to the community and to the Advisory Committee to recognize someone as a non-voting member of the board. So we do bring that before you as a recommendation.
Okay, go ahead.
I know the City of San Leandro on item 4 was just a little concerned in regards to making sure that the mix of the 5 is somehow represented between small and large jurisdictions, and that geographically it's represented well.
Those are things that I would take into consideration. I can tell you I won't do this in a vacuum. I will probably be discussing with everybody that wants it. I know I've gotten 2 emails. And I would also be discussing it with the vice chair, so this won't be done in a vacuum, and I guarantee that when we looked at the appointments of the Citizen Advisory Committee, I think that those involved would agree that I was very sensitive to not only ethnicity but also geographical representation too. So, and I would continue that.
Excuse me, so the Joint Powers Agreement definition of the ex officio member of the board, who is the chair of the Citizen Advisory Committee, section 1.113 specifically states that the ex officio board member may not serve on the executive committee or participate in closed session meetings of the board.
Okay. All right. You want to...
Is there a reason for that? I mean, I understand that we need to have 5 voting members, but I don't understand why that would preclude a non-voting member and recognition of the importance of community engagement, especially in these areas.
I personally don't know the reason. I mean, I know it's something that we all agreed to. You know, I personally understand the reason for closed session. On the executive committee, I don't know that I understand the reasoning, but it is in the agreement as it is written now, so I don't think we can violate the agreement.
Well, wasn't it because there's personnel and legal things and...
I think that is more to the closed session part of it, plus I think the closed session issue may be even more of a, I could be wrong, but a legal reason, not just something we established. As far as the executive committee, I personally don't remember the rationale. So I guess at this point, I mean, it's what you have before you. If you want to, I mean, it's something that I can take under advisement, Anna Olivia, but right now the agreement says that it can't happen. And in order to get this up and running, I think, you know, I guess I can take it in consideration along with the vice chair, and I'm sure it won't be the last I hear from you. But right now we're kind of, this is the way it is. So I don't know. Crickets. Hold on, I got Spadowski.
I'm just wondering if anybody remembers the rationale behind it, because it's something that popped up when I saw it on the agenda. I thought, oh, well, maybe we need it for some reason, but if we don't need it, then should we? Well, it's in the, we have to, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we can't remember the rationale, I think we're kind of...
Well, I would say we could move forward with this, and in the meantime, I'll consult with the vice chair and talk to him. And will Bruce be back soon?
Next meeting.
Next meeting?
He'll be here for next meeting, so we can consult with
Bruce. But will he be back to where he's somebody we could consult with on this?
Yes.
Soon?
Yes, Stephanie.
Then
yes.
Maybe we could do that too, and go from there. I mean, like I said, I understand the closed session issue, and I think that's almost a legal issue. Yeah. On the executive committee, I'm not 100% sure of the reason. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask council a question. I think Anna Olivia was trying to get to this point. Does the JPA say that, is it just in relation to the chair of the advisory committee, or can possibly another member of the advisory committee serve?
Well, that's a good question. And in addition to saying that the ex officio board member may not serve on the executive committee, which is very express, the description of the executive committee in 4.6 describes it being consisting of a smaller number of directors with a capital D, and directors is defined as appointed members appointed by each of the parties to the joint powers agreement, which would be the governing board, and would exclude the non-voting member. I was not part of the negotiation of this agreement, so I can't speak at all to the intent behind that.
And I would also mention that maybe the cities, there might have been a city that actually raised this. So go ahead, Al.
So I think the way to proceed tonight is to implement the executive committee without a CAC member. But I think I would agree. I think it would be nice to have a CAC member as a member of the executive committee. And so what I would suggest to the board is that, at some point we may need to revise the JPA docs, and I'm not suggesting we do that just for this, but to keep track of this as a change that we'd want to slip in, if and when the JPA agreement needs to get revised, so that we can have community representation on the executive committee as a non-voting member.
I would say I'll also spend the next 2 weeks on this, working at it, just see what we can do with it. I'm never opposed to having Anna Olivia's opinion. She's never seemed to upset me yet. And I know that she was very valuable. That's my litmus test. That she was very valuable during the selection of our executive director. So I'll just keep. I hear what you're saying, and that's fine. But I would also say that over the next 2 weeks, I'll try to do some work on this too and see what I can find out.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Diddle.
You need a motion to?
Yes.
Okay, I move that we establish an executive committee of the board of directors to provide administrative and operational support to the CEO and oversight of the East Bay Community Energy Authority.
Second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. What about item 2? Appoint the chair of 5 voting members, appointed by the chair of the 5 voting members. Are you moving that too?
I was going to do motions, but I can do it in the same one. And I also add that the appointments by chair of 5 voting members of the board of directors to serve on the executive committee for a 1-year term. The executive committee should have an odd number of directors, and the positions may be renewed without term limits.
Is that still a second?
Second.
So, okay, that's a second. It is kind of interesting, though. It says appointment of the chair of 5 voting members. So I guess the chair would be appointing themselves and still be part of the 5 voting members, because it also says it needs to be odd. So just an observation. I guess the chair doesn't have to appoint himself, but that would be not very smart. Yeah, it'd be weird. Okay, so is there any objection to that motion? Yes.
The 4.6 of the JPA agreement says that the board shall establish an executive committee. Is council comfortable that that establishment by the board includes delegation of the right to appoint to the chair?
This motion is giving that right.
With this motion, I believe you could delegate that appointment authority to the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, is there any objection to the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. If you wish to serve, please get an email in soon. And I'll go ahead and appoint based on the concerns that was brought up in the discussion. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, so we're going to, as I said, we continued item 5, so we're going to move to item 6.
Yep. So item 6 is an update on our credit and banking services. Actually, today we issued a request for proposals for credit and banking services. There were 3 primary components of this. One was a working capital, a line of working capital for predominantly the necessary administrative costs. that the EBCE will incur between now and launch. The second aspect were account services, so setting up accounts, treasury to manage our revenues from our customers. And the third was a line of working capital to support energy market participation. And that was in the range of $30 to $60 million. We're going to request a variety of options there. So this is really just an update that we've done that. We expect responses to start coming in 2 weeks, and may be able to move as quickly as to bring a recommendation to the board at the board meeting on the third Wednesday of October. That would be sort of our intention, given how quickly we need to move to get those capabilities in place. And there's a whole underwriting process that happens after you select a vendor. So, with that, we will be conducting interviews, and while the selection process will be made by EBCE staff, and we will be negotiating a contract to bring to the board for approval. If there's interest among any board members to sit on the interview panels, there's certainly I'm certainly very, very open to, and would encourage any board members that wants to sit on an interview panel to meet some of these vendors. No need to answer right now. Again, we will not have responses for 2 weeks. So if there's interest, send me an email, and we can go from there.
Okay, so and what's before us is there is a recommendation to receive the report and provide feedback or direction. It also, second, is to select a member of the board of directors and a member of the community advisory committee to participate in the interviews. Anna Lydia, is this something you want to do?
So our discussion around this, we were happy to receive the report. We did want to add that being conscious about maintaining a dedication to good corporate governance standards and labor practices in selection of our credit and banking services vendor is important. Yeah. That we don't want to be financing the thing that we're working against. So that was our input, and yes, we are happy to select somebody to sit on the interview committee.
So that was a yes to me?
Yes.
You said you would serve on the committee?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Jesse?
So I'll move the recommendation, and then I had a question. It wasn't clear in the report. I know that when we discussed banking services at previous meetings, the intention was to ensure, I haven't seen the RFP, so Nick, if you can just let me know. Yep. I think the intention was to ensure there was some criteria around socially responsible investments. I know it's complicated. We're going through the same process in the city of Berkeley right now, depending on what specific banking needs the particular agency needs. But was that incorporated into the RFP? Is that going to be considered as part of the process going forward, the socially responsible investment criteria, particularly around fossil fuel investments and projects?
So yes, there are disclosure. We ask our respondents to disclose whether they have fossil fuel investments. As you kind of recognize, at our size, you do run into some challenges about being able to work with smaller community banks. When we interviewed, I met with a number of banks, small, medium, and large banks, and really 25 to 30 million is the lending limit for most of the smaller banks or medium-sized banks that tend to be more mission-driven. Mm-hmm. So if we do find ourselves in a place where we need to access more like 40, 50, 60 million, you do start to have to look at a national bank. Mm-hmm. That said, we did ask for disclosure. We very purposely did not send a request. We did not send the request for proposals to Wells Fargo because of their ongoing participation in the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I think we proactively reached out to some local banks, Beneficial State Bank in Oakland, Bank of Fremont, and the Amalgamated Bank as well. So there are a number of banks that we proactively met with to ensure that they knew about this opportunity. And we certainly are going to make sure that we ask some questions about what those investments look like, and use it as a criteria.
So yeah, I mean, we need to make the fiscally prudent decision. But for example, the $5 million revolving line of credit, that could be something like Beneficial or a community bank that has a good record could be the appropriate vendor. So I trust your judgment in these decisions. I just, going forward, to the extent that certain elements of our credit or banking services can be considered for community banks and banks that have a much better track record in socially responsible investment, that we just think about that. We're going to have to, the city of Berkeley, for example, look at potentially breaking up our contract into multiple pieces and farming out certain elements to different banks. So just something to consider in the process going forward.
And I would say that was absolutely part of the discussion. So for Beneficial State Bank, one of the very explicit reason for meeting with them is understanding that they don't have the credit capacity to.
Okay.
So it was very focused on the $5 million opportunity. And I think, we're considering you do run into some challenges when you break pieces up. Then you have to set up intercreditor agreements between banks. And then, they will ask who has the first right, who's the first lien. So there's some challenges, but we've structured the RFP, which will be circulated. It was only completed yesterday, so but it will be circulated. You'll see that it reflects those values, and it provides for some flexibility to try to engage with a small and a large bank.
Thank you.
I did have a motion, and I was uncomfortable. I needed a second, but is there a second? Okay, I got a second. So along those lines, Mayor, you seemed rather interested. Do you want to represent the board?
It depends on the time commitment. As we all know, Berkeley there's a lot going on in my city right now.
What's going on? Come on.
So what would be the timeline, Nick, for that?
I expect that it would be depending on the number that you want, it could be as little as an hour or 2 hours, and as much as, more hours than that. But I think that could be as, the commitment. I
don't really think he's looking at more than a 5-hour commitment, right?
Okay.
I really, no, what I mean by that is probably reading over the applications. There may be an interview.
Yeah, I think what we would probably do is the short list of the top 3.
And the interview is going to be where most of your time is consumed, and that's one day.
Sure, I'd be happy to do it.
All right, so with that, as part of the motion, I would like to appoint Ann Olivia from the Community Advisory Committee and you from the Board of Directors. Can you accept that amendment to the motion? And the seconder, who was the seconder? I forget. Was it, you're okay with that? Okay, is there any objection to the motion? Wait, anybody wish to speak on this item? Is there any objection to the motion? Motion passed without objection. Thank you. Item 7.
Item 7 is there's no presentation. This is just a document that we wanted to share. Our marketing consultant, Circle Point, has reached out to the board and to the CAC to engage them in focus groups. So this is a document for those of you who have expressed interest in participating in the focus group. This is an overview of what the focus groups will be looking to cover around our branding and messaging.
Oh, Jesus. Where does that go out? Okay, Subin Devar.
Pardon me, Chair, that's for item 8.
Huh?
Item 8, that's for item 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, any questions on this? Yes, sir.
That item is also for number 8.
Oh, you're right. I need to look at my numbers. Okay, update on the marketing and community outreach. Anybody got anything? Okay, hearing none. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Sir, I think you wanted to speak on item 8. I'm sorry, I called you in error. I apologize. All right, we'll move from item 8 to item 7 to item 8.
Yep. So item 8 is an update on our hiring and staffing plan. So first I want to welcome Stephanie Cabrera as our second hire as clerk of the board, and my executive assistant. So welcome, Stephanie. I believe you start full-time next week. EBC, I've been spending a considerable amount of my time going through the interview process for a variety of candidates. We've had over 75 respondents to the Chief Operating Officer position, 20 or 30 respondents to our General Counsel, Power Resources. So really a lot of interest, really very high caliber candidates from, very senior people at PG&E, other large energy companies. So I'm very pleased by the respondents, and I think we're going to build a great team. I expect that in the next week or so, we'll finalize the hire for the Chief Operating Officer, and over the course of really October, we should hire a Director of Power Resources, a person to head up our systems, so focusing on the data management and billing system, and a person to take over sort of all of the customer functions. So that's the customer relationship management system, our marketing, and start a key account management and outreach to large customers. So I expect, we'll be at 5 or so by the end of October, and then ramp that further up with a general counsel, a director of community and legislative affairs, and a senior regulatory affairs person to help manage all of the engagements at the California Public Utilities Commission. So that gets us to roughly 10 people by the end of the year, and more or less gives us coverage in all the major areas we need to have coverage to be able to move into 2018, getting ready to launch. So the document that was passed along is an org chart that I will say is probably changed already in my mind, but gives a sense of where we're prioritizing hires. I would say the top 4 lines are the areas that I expect to be focusing hires this year.
It's a big piece of paper with some very small boxes. All right, any comments on this? A very quiet group today. Subin Devar.
Thank you, Chair and Board. Just to clarify. Is it on now? Yep. Okay. Well, thank you all. Just a quick thing, if you're confused, my last name changed since you last saw me. I got married. We changed our last names. So anyways, I'm the same person.
But I said it right?
You did. See, it got
good.
easier. Yeah. Just to make sure that the board is clear, the paper that was just passed out was just a recommendation from me. The actual, in your materials, you'll have the original presented org chart that doesn't have writing on it. Well, I think that's in, yeah. You have one that looks like that. So just make that clear. So I wanted to speak to one specific recommendation from both the Community Advisory Committee, which Ann Olivia will speak to, but then one like a specific addition to that from myself, which is we discussed the benefit of having at the director level a director of community engagement. And since being able to review this, I wanted to add some specific thoughts on how that doesn't need to be an additional staff person, how I think we could just rearrange an existing staff person that's in the idea for the draft org chart. So I just wanted to point out a couple of key reasons why I think this is important. I think that our organizational chart can mirror some of the core lines of strategy of our authority and really reflect our marketing niche in being responsive to the community. So I think there are 4 key parts of that. So, we're a community choice entity, so we want to really engage the community. And I appreciate that there's already a community outreach role. And to balance out reaching out to the community, we also have to have a role that inputs in from the community, and that's the distinction between community engagement versus just community outreach or marketing. So along with the level of community engagement would be balanced the other key director roles, one in charge of buying, which is the power resources, one in charge of selling, marketing, and then one in charge of law and regulation. So these are the core 4 roles. So I think it's really important to make this sort of suggestion, which is a slight adaptation to what other CCAs have done, but we'll double down on how we're different and prioritizing those values that we say that we are. Thank you.
Okay, and Olivia, did you have something?
Thank you, Subin. So we really appreciated the chart that was coming up, and in particular that the role of community outreach and community affairs are different, because it's very, very different positions that are held, and we also recognize that the role of government relations and community outreach are also different roles. It takes different skill sets to sell something to someone than it does to listen to them. And if we are going to be successful, if we're going to have the level of not opting out and the level of opting up that we hope happens, making sure that especially as we develop this, that there is a priority to our constituents and to our customers is really very key. And so Subin made a new chart, which was helpful and much clearer than what I could have said. So we did agree that at a director level, a director of community engagement be a key component. Other than that, it was beautiful.
Comments? I mean, at this point, I think we're still just kind of trying to figure out who you're going to hire, so I don't know that we're even needing to get kind of involved in this whole discussion right now, to be honest with you. I didn't know you had a ton of money, and so I think we have to be, I think right now you're just pretty much hiring the top of the chart, isn't that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I mean, I think at some point the conversation could be valid, but I'm just not quite sure we're there yet. Those are my comments. Yes.
Chair, I know we're in an early stage, but I wanted to offer my support to this idea. I think it speaks to our goals as a JPA, and it was my understanding that this is that the community got us to where we are today. So I would offer my support to making this change, even if at this early stage.
I'll just simply second that.
I guess I would just sort of...
You guys, you're spending... Yeah, I don't think this is a formal thing, but I mean, I think we need to be mindful that nobody's spent money yet except for Alameda County. And it's not a blank check. And I think we need to be careful and we need to be methodical in how we're doing the hiring and who we're bringing on and when we're bringing them on. And I don't think the board taking action today is actually doing that.
The point I wanted to add about this draft org chart and the evolution of the org chart is that the focus today is on hiring the key functions that are going to position us to launch. That definitely includes community engagement, because we have to engage with, our customers. But we have limited resources, and we are laser focused on launch and delivering on launch.
That was pretty much my point.
Yep. So
I would also note that this is a discussion item, is not on the agenda as an action item. So I guess anything we've taken action on has said action next to it.
So I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So there's 2 positions I see in the proposed organization chart. Under Director of Marketing and Account Services, there's a Community Outreach Manager. So I'm assuming that person is going to be coordinating the outreach to customers as we roll out the agency. Is that the intention of that position?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's also a Community Affairs Manager, and I guess is that more of a PR position, or?
I think community outreach is more focused on, if you think about our customers from a segmentation standpoint, you have commercial, industrial, and you have residential. Community outreach is more focused on the marketing to the residential customer class, whereas your community affairs manager is more engaged with community groups and more, sort of the push versus the pull. I would say that community affairs manager is more sort of taking ideas from the community, whereas the community outreach is more saying, all right, here are our products, sign up for 100%, don't opt out, those kinds of things.
So the community affairs manager, I guess, and this is just a kind of a suggested org chart. I mean, these positions, the job descriptions will be developed in the coming weeks and months, but I mean, that there is a level of community engagement that position is going to be involved in, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And your director of marketing has to be engaged with the community because that is, part and parcel of developing our offerings to the residents.
Okay. Thank you.
Subin? I don't normally do this, and government doesn't normally do this, but go ahead.
No, I really appreciate just a moment to give an additional comment and clarification. The reason why I think direction from the board right now would be really valuable is that there are postings already for 5 positions. They are at the director level. I think it's you have in front of you the marketing and communications material that shows the rollout to community. There's a plan to hire about 10 staff by the end of this year. So the suggestion wasn't an additional staff person. It's moving around the same total number of staff to hire. The suggestion would just be to hire right after the currently posted positions to hire the director of community engagement before moving on to levels further below. And it would be in place of the community affairs role that's already on there. You'd remove that and then add this director position. I just wanted to clarify that, both the urgency and the timing and that direction, even if it's not a decision, but the direction from the board right now would be valuable.
So I think, I'll get you in a second, but I think that, people need to be mindful that there is also there's a pay difference between a director and people that are working for the directors. And I'm just not sure that this position rises to the level of a director. Go ahead, Al.
So I would sort of echo that and just say that, I think the input is good from a functional perspective, and I think that the CEO has heard it and some of the board members have agreed with it, and I would echo that. But we've hired a CEO whose job is to staff the agency and figure out what that structure looks like, and out of respect for him, and he's doing a great job so far. I think the exact nature of the org chart, Mr. Chassett, that is for you to figure out. If there end up being functions that are missing as you hire out, you're going to hear from us, but I don't see them missing here, and I trust you to fill it out in a way that makes sense. So I would suggest that we trust our CEO.
Just on, just as a follow-up, I guess what the board is saying is I think it's important as we are doing initial staffing to really prioritize that community affairs engagement piece. So I just wanted to provide that input to you in your consideration as you're staffing up.
Absolutely.
Okay, and again, I'll note that this is on the agenda as discussion item only. I think that, I have seen agendas where the board, there's some disclaimer that says the board may take action on any item or something like that. I might suggest that the attorney look at something like that in the future, but for today's purposes, it is a discussion. Therefore, the motion in the second is not germane to the discussion. But I think I would go with what...
Chair, I didn't make a motion. I just made a comment. Thank you.
Pardon me?
I didn't make a motion. I just...
Oh, it got a second. They can second it.
Okay, but I didn't make a motion.
Okay, good. Then there's no motion on the floor. Thank you. There was only a second to the comment. Okay, good. All right, he seconded the comment then. Anybody else? Okay, and Nick, I think you've heard from the committee, and I would agree too that it's great for us to pop in and out, the first or third Wednesday of the month, but I think we really have to rely on you to run the agency, and I would echo what Al said. I think it's very important You were hired because of your abilities, and I think we need to let you show us your abilities. So, but then I would ask you to be mindful with what is the discussion too. And because you do need to be able to count to the majority at all times, correct? Although it's not like a city council where you only have to count to 3. You got a lot to count to.
It's like, well, I guess it's still 2 hands.
What do you say?
Still 2 hands.
Yeah,
Still 2
yeah, there
hands
you
to
go.
count too.
Okay. All right. With that, we're going to move to the overview of contracts entered by the EBCE.
Yes. Okay. Well, so at the last meeting, there was a delegation of authority to me to sign contracts up to $100,000 without prior board approval, but to report on those contracts at the subsequent meeting. And so in the last 6 or so weeks, I have entered into 5 contracts, really all for various types of professional services. So the first is a contract with California Strategies to help me in my review of the many deliverables associated with the local development business plan. You know, we have consultants who are out there doing really fine work there, and they're sending me the work. And you know, right now I don't have a staff to sort of help me review that and really to provide some of the technical depth. There are certainly aspects of the local development business plan that are qualitative in nature, but there's some very technical pieces too, and I want to make sure that I'm giving it the thorough review so that it is a document that is of the very highest quality, and it provides us with some really important actionable insights. So I contracted with California Strategies, really with Matthew Tisdale, actually a former colleague of mine at the California Public Utilities Commission, who authored the Distributed Energy Resource Roadmap for the state of California, and Tony Brunello, who is the founder of the More Than Smart group that has done a lot of really innovative thinking around distributed energy resources. The second contract was with Policy DER, and really this one is more of a pro forma contract than anything. It's for $100 a month with John Wellinghoff, the former chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and this is for him to be able to sign a non-disclosure agreement and to work with us as we consider an interesting opportunity with Pacific Gas and Electric. They're looking at a peaker plant located in Jack London Square that is very old and is on the verge of retirement, and they need to replace the capacity, and they're looking for non-wires local resource alternatives like rooftop solar, energy efficiency, and energy storage. And so these will be our customers that will be providing these resources, and so we are seeking to engage with PG&E to enter into an agreement with them where we would partially fund the project and PG&E would partially fund the project. So John has spent a lot of his career looking at how these things work, so he's come on board to help think this through. The third contract is with the law firm of Keys and Fox, and it is to review some renewable power purchase agreements. I sent the board, each of you, a note a ways back outlining an opportunity for municipal accounts to opt up to 100% local renewable product category. And so Keys and Fox is looking at how that product would be structured. The fourth contract is with Taj Ait-Lausin. Taj is a former executive at Oracle who worked in their utility billing group. So this is somebody who spent the last 10 years developing billing systems and data management systems to sell to utilities. And so we've hired Taj to help with the implementation plan for GridX. Actually, my hope is that we will bring Taj on full-time in a senior level to really manage all of our systems. So billing, data management, rate design, kind of the numbers and the data that are going to be behind all of the decisions that we make. And finally, the last contract is with Public Financial Management, and it was to support the completion of the banking and credit services RFP that was just issued.
Questions? No questions. This is an informational item. Also, with that, any public? Great. Okay. So board member or staff member announcements, again, I go back to what I was talking about earlier. I think we need to start looking at some sort of legislative advocate in Sacramento, somebody that can help us with bills and keep track on what the legislature's up to. The bills that we were able to fight back with the community, again, I want to thank the community. But those bills will be coming back in some form next year, and we need to be prepared. So that's something I would like to see you work on. Is there anybody else with any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. A heads up as far out in advance as that we can get. I know you had a last minute scramble to make some phone calls, and you know, some of us I think were able to do that, but yeah, any kind of forewarning about that is better. So.
And Olivia?
This also came up at the Community Advisory Committee. We would like to find a way, especially as we go into session again, to get regular briefings on what's happening either in Sacramento or nationally that will affect energy policy and how it affects EBCE. So if we can find a way to do that, and Nick was very agreeable to that, finding a way to do briefings for this board and for the committee, but we would definitely like to be included in that.
Right. I'm not sure that we would get our ledge advocate to come down every 2 weeks or even once a month to brief us. They may do we might be able to get a quarterly or semi-annual briefing face-to-face, but one thing I would hope that they do is they do send us some sort of bi-weekly, this is what's going on, so it could be discussed in the committees, or Nick could present it to the board, and we could talk about it too, but also it'd be presented to the CAC too, where they could talk about it. So I don't expect we'll always get a face-to-face meeting, but I would expect that we get some sort of documentation from them, at least, if we're meeting monthly, or if we're meeting twice a month, then twice a month, we should see some sort of documentation coming out of Sacramento.
Yep, absolutely.
And that should be part of the requirement of the contract.
Yep, absolutely. So to that point, I have started to set up interviews with a couple potential advocates, and if there are some specific advocates that anyone recommends from the board recommends, I'm happy to speak with them. But I hope to get that done on fairly short order.
One of the things I would say, and I know this is relatively difficult, but I am interested in having somebody that understands specifically what it is that we do. I'm not necessarily looking for somebody that, for example, is an expert in transportation. But having said that, there's some CCAs that have actually worn out their welcome in Sacramento. And I think you know who I'm talking about. And I wouldn't want their advocate to be our advocate. So you're going to have to walk kind of a fine line. You're going to have to find the most experienced, best one, and then find out one that will be advocating specifically on behalf of the CCA.
Absolutely.
My thought.
And I will say over the course of the fall, I also plan to meet with all of our members of the State Senate and Assembly and have outreach to their offices to set those meetings up, to introduce myself and just make sure that EBCE is much more on their radar going into next session than it perhaps was for the last session. I do have one item actually related to banking and credit services, and this sort of maybe is an amplification of the point that Chair Haggerty made about participation in our funding. So I did have a meeting today with Steve Manning, the auditor controller of Alameda County, about EBC's working capital needs, and made the commitment to him that I would engage with all of our cities as we consider potential forms of credit support for EBCE as we go and try to secure the $5 million that we need to get us over the launch finish line. So I would very much ask any city that has any willingness to at least entertain some sort of credit support to please reach out to me, and I'd love to sit down with your auditor, controller, your city manager, your council members, and have that conversation. I do think that it's important for Alameda County to see that the city members are there as well, supporting this entity financially.
Al?
So on that point, a formal letter requesting that went out to all the cities would be helpful.
Great, absolutely.
To the city managers,
Yep.
perhaps.
We will absolutely do that.
Thank you. And obviously copy us so that we know. Thank you.
I think you bring up an interesting thought, though, when you were talking about you getting to know the legislators. I would trust you know most of them already in your previous job. But I think it would be good for us to do some sort of I don't want to say reception because that includes all kinds of different discussions, but some sort of a meet and greet where we all could be there with our legislators and let them know that you're on it, you're on it, and you're on it, and you're on it. And when they're making these wacky decisions in Sacramento, they may want to remember, the face behind what is the mission of what we're trying to do here. So we may want to consider some sort of. I know ABAG does that. And MTC actually does it too. But they actually have these times where they go up and they have like everybody invited at once and everybody's together and we maybe go over a little bit of what our plan is, kind of where we've come from, where we're going, and just let them know a little bit about us. And that's something we may want to consider in the near future.
Okay, absolutely.
Spadowski's calling it an open house. So it's at Spadowski's house, for those of you who want to brave Livermore traffic. Okay, anything else? Anybody else? Jesse?
So I just want to thank Nick for his very timely updates about the status of the Bradford bill. Really helped us. I called certainly our representatives, Representative Berkeley, and spoke with them personally. It really helped us know what's going on and made it easier for us to lobby on behalf of the interests of EBCE. So thank you.
Yeah, and it appeared that in this last session that Senator Skinner was very instrumental in somebody that needed to be educated on which way to go on the bill. And so it's good that we have those relationships where we can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is not a good bill, and they listen. So for those of you who made those calls, especially to her, that was very helpful, and thank you.
Yep, it really did make a difference, so thank you.
Okay, anybody else? We're adjourned until October 4th. Thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Cabrera. Email for you about trying to get this meeting.